And Paul, you are muted.
Now then, perhaps I can be heard and perhaps you can see the pictures.
Yep, both. Yes.
Of course, our pictures again come to us from our resident artist in what's the appropriate term? The the artist guru for our show, and she has sent these drawings across so you can pick up a little bit of the hint of who the people are that are expected to review tonight, and the fact that she put that character on a black mule wearing a red Chiefs jacket um, front and center means that I want to give them a special honor because most of us don't get the extra color that she's given this one. But yeah, thank you, Kathy, for the drawings of our speakers. All right, our uh, our review this evening is going to be not necessarily in order of sequence because Diane Slade is asked to go first on the Bicentennial Steering Committee, so we'll allow that. But we do have Thomas Murphy with us and James Lucas and Karen Hyatt, I think I heard just has joined us, Stephen Schultz and myself. So that's going to be several 5 to 7 or 10 minute reviews of the presentations that we've had. And we do this because the archaeologists in me at the end of the season always like to go back and look over the artifacts to see what is there that really merits being talked about. And so when we go back over the 8 previous sessions to review them, we want to know what's been presented that's really worth thinking about, talking about, and incorporating into the body of the people who are agents of the Prince of Peace. And so if you'll join me with that, oh yes, our topics tonight then, Thomas Murphy spoke to us about the Iroquois Law of Peace. Whitney Hornig on Hyrum Smith, the monogamous leader. Rainbow Eagle on Holy Ground. James Lucas on Zion. Diane Slade on the Bicentennial Steering Committee, and so I'll go first. Paul DeBarthe on Moses and the Book of Mormon. Karen Hyatt on the Whitney letter. Stephen Schultz on Stewardship in the Book of Mormon. So given that sequence, let us pray together. God, the Father of the human family, dysfunctional as we are, so often producing calamity in Iran, Lebanon, Sudan, where we now see renewed war, in Ukraine, Israel, Sudan, human rights violations we abhor. Yet you, our Creator, encourage us to live in peace, to become functional, loving people whose respect does increase. This evening, we see our family at war, killing each other over claims to segments of the earth, failing to recognize that you create each of us to be talented, productive persons, each one of worth. In the Book of Mormon, we see examples of our family's warring past and a few examples of the promised land, peace on earth, our land so vast. And as we review where we are and where we would like to be, we seek your guidance, your grace, your forgiveness for the human family. And we ask for your spirit to somehow intervene to help us through our crises, to create a peaceful scene so that our children can inculcate the child, the lamb, and the lion, learning the culture, the language, the attitudes to be used in the land of Zion. Amen. All right, I stopped the sharing and we turn to Diane Slade for a quick review of the steering committee presentation. And it's a reminder that we are presuming to host the Bicentennial Book of Mormon celebration in Lamoni in 2030. And so 4 times a year, we are having steering committee meetings on our sessions to be able to try to promote that and give it substance to turn the conversation into reality. And so all of you are invited to participate. Many of you have already decided to be part of the steering committee, and whether you are representing an organization with a vote and voice, or just simply are here as a person with a voice, in either case, we welcome you all to have your participation and voice in what we develop. Diane?
Okay, awesome. So we're slowly getting things coming together. The main points that we focused on this last meeting was discussing again our venues, which is going to be the Shaw Center, and we've got a couple different rooms that we can use, and possibly even outdoors with maybe some tents if it starts to rain for the youth. But we're still going back and forth as far as how many days we'd like it to last, whether 2, 3, or 6. At the moment, it is kind of focusing more on the 3 days. So it'd be July 26th to the 28th, or August 6th through the 4th are the days that we're looking at for a 3-day event. Blair Bryant has said that he's working on a few things, but he would like to be able to offer us some seed money to be able to get this project going forward, which we are very grateful for. But I know we are also working on other aspects to be able to get some more money so we can make this project come to fruition. The last meeting, we talked a lot on the youth, trying to really focus on them and give them the love of the Book of Mormon and things that we can do. We talked about even maybe having a service project for the youth to do, maybe that being the archaeological dig, or a couple other things that we'll be looking at. We are still wanting to keep this as a non-denominational, because I know we had talked about a large aspect we were looking at is the LDS youth, how we can get it to be like a youth conference, which can bring in quite a few people. When they've had it in the past, it can be hundreds of youth that attend those things. But even though we might, if it does work, even though we have a lot of the LDS involved, we still want to keep it as a non-denominational, and be able to hear everybody's testimonies and things is what we're looking at there. That was our real focus this last time, was really we want to have the youth involved. So if anyone else has any other ideas, it's Mark Hensley and Bruce Nelson that you guys can reach out to share your ideas with them as we get this building. Just so you know, our next meeting will be on June 29th, and we'll send out invites, but we'd love to have everybody's help going forward. And that is that.
Because Diane is going to be ducking out, if there's any questions or comments relative to this activity, this presentation, then you need to get those in now. I would also highlight that Blair Bryant has produced a new edition of Between the Covers of the Book of Mormon, which was written by his mother and father, to make available for this bicentennial celebration. So the Blair Bryant contributions already are so significant. But then we have I think it's 20 people signed up to be members of the steering committee, and that reaches a broad range across the restoration spectrum. Oh, and with the youth, Josh Gailey of the Monongahela group is one of the youth leaders as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Then let's move to Thomas Murphy on his review of the Iroquois Law of Peace.
Well, thank you, Paul. It's an honor to be back with you. Let me share my screen. Okay. Can you see that?
Yes, we can.
Well, I was able to join on March 2nd to speak a little bit about the Iroquois Great Law of Peace. My focus was particularly on an article that I had recently published in Dialogue, a Journal of Mormon Thought. And that article is entitled White is a Knight, the Book of Mormon's Misappropriation of the Iroquois Great Law of Peace. That article is available online for free downloads at the Dialogue website. There's also an oral recording of me reading the article on YouTube. You can find it on my YouTube channel at Dr. T.W. Murphy or at Latter Daily Digest as well. And uh, the article is a synopsis of a couple of chapters of a forthcoming book that I am publishing called Unsettling Scripture, Iroquois and the Great Law of Peace. And I want to highlight that you have only a couple of days left for a special discount that I was able to secure for Book of Mormon Perspectives participants. And that's a 25% pre-order discount from University of Utah Press. If you key in on that QR code on the screen, it'll take you directly to the University of Utah Press's website, and you can order directly from there. That discount code will expire April 30th. So you only have a couple of days left if you have not pre-ordered. So hopefully there was at least some interest in the book in this group. I think that the prayer that Paul opened with is a great way to frame, if you will, the content that I shared. The discussion of war and peace is central both to that article and to the book. It's also central to the Iroquois Great Law of Peace and the Book of Mormon. And if we look at, well, let me explain a little bit first about who the Iroquois are, or review who the Iroquois are. The Iroquois call themselves the Haudenosaunee. The Haudenosaunee means the people of the Longhouse. Iroquois is the name applied by the French, and Five and later Six Nations is the name applied by the English. And the Haudenosaunee consist of five and later six nations of upstate New York. The Mohawk Nation on the east is the eastern door. The Oneida is next, going west. The Onondaga hosts the central fire of the nation, and it's at Onondaga that the peacemaker unified the five nations. And then the Cayuga and the Seneca, and the Senecas traditionally guard the the western door of the Confederacy. So these, if you notice the reference to Rochester there, of course, Palmyra is nearby, and Manchester, of course, are part of Seneca territory. And so these are the traditional lands of the Book of Mormon, or the traditional peoples from where the Book of Mormon came. Okay, from the land where the Book of Mormon or the gold plates, according to the stories that are told, came from Hill Cumorah, which is near Manchester and Palmyra, and that is within Seneca territory. And so what this book and article try to do is put the Book of Mormon into dialogue with the stories of the Seneca and the larger Haudenosaunee nations. And both in the late 18th century, of course, the United States had been through a Revolutionary War that divided these nations, and that had come together unified under the peacemaker. You ended up with the Oneidas and the Tuscaroras, the sixth nation who would join the Confederacy later. They fought on the side of the Americans, and the Mohawks, Cayugas, and Senecas and Onondagas mostly fought on the side of the British. And so they had been divided by war in the 18th century. And law ended up because there was a larger siding with the British than with the Americans, and we know that the Americans won the revolution. And so when the Americans and British came together, to sign a peace treaty at the end of the Revolutionary War, they left out entirely their indigenous allies, both the Americans and the British. And so that left basically these nations at the mercy of the United States. And when we look at the land tenure today, we can see that the United States was not kind to people that it had perceived as being their enemies during war. And so those smaller spots on the screen are in purple are the reservations, the remaining lands of the Haudenosaunee people. And so there was an enormous loss. And so in the 1820s, when Joseph Smith is dictating the Book of Mormon, the Haudenosaunee people are going through a very difficult time of theirs. They have lost most of their lands. They are under the control of an emergent United States and trying to negotiate treaties with the United States. Some of these treaties were negotiated under very hostile circumstances. And you had a candidate for the president of the United States by the name of Andrew Jackson, who ends up winning in 1828 on a platform of removing indigenous peoples from their lands to the west. And so the Haudenosaunee are facing this horrendous loss, this removal, the genocide essentially, and are combating it. And it's in that context that a Tuscarora author by the name of David Cusick published a book called The Six Nations, or The Sketches of the Ancient History of the Six Nations, comprising a tale of the foundation of the great island, now North America, the two infants born and the creation of the universe. He published this in Lewiston, New York, near the Tuscarora Reservation. And he shared in this a story of what we would recognize today as part of the Peacemaker epic of a great lawgiver that came to unite the five nations in the ancient past. And in a sense, at this time that Haudenosaunee are in the aftermath of violent wars and conflicts, facing the dire possibility of removal, they are telling stories about a time in the past when they were together, where the nations were united, where peace reigned. Something we might also wish for today. And you end up in the Book of Mormon in the 1820s. You have Joseph Smith dictating an account that he says he translated from a set of gold plates that he found. And in that dictation, he tells of a great peace as well. This one, the peacemaker, is known as Jesus. And the peacemaker also brings together Lamanites and Nephites together and creates a unified nation. But in the Mormon version, there's something a little bit different than what we see in the Haudenosaunee version. And in Fourth Nephi, what we see is that the narrators portray the unity as a nation of no manner of ites, yet simultaneously the people are described as exceedingly fair and delightsome. And so we have this at once a whiteness and a unified nation that's bringing together the dark-skinned Lamanites with the lighter-skinned Nephites in a unification that erases the Lamanite identities. And so it's that conundrum that I wrestle with in the article is uh, how is it that we can imagine a peace that seems to be here benefiting people with white privilege and undermining the sovereignty and authority of indigenous nations. And so what I do in the article is I share Haudenosaunee stories that they tell about how Mormons came to be. And in those stories, the the explanation for the similarities between the Book of Mormon and Haudenosaunee narratives like that found in David Cusick's book is that they shared these stories with Joseph Smith, and that it's living people that are at the center of these Haudenosaunee narratives. But when we hear the narratives passed down in the Restoration traditions, Joseph Smith gets these plates from dead white Nephites. And so that the dead are given the emphasis in our Restoration traditions. And what if we could imagine or see the world differently through the Haudenosaunee eyes and see that maybe living indigenous people had been involved in this process? And if they were, how would that change the way that we build peace today? And so in the article, I suggest that we take these stories much more seriously, that we take the time to listen to Haudenosaunee accounts and use them to enrich our understanding of the Book of Mormon. And if this great peace is something that actually happened, and I think it probably did in some form, then having or reading the Book of Mormon within the context of Haudenosaunee oral traditions about how they remember these events can enrich all of our understanding. And so my hope in what I shared here in this forum and in my forthcoming book is that we can open more of a dialogue between Haudenosaunee communities and restoration communities. Of course, I've been sharing this material in Haudenosaunee materials, workshopping it at Conference on Iroquois Research. I've been workshopping it with indigenous perspectives on the meanings of Lamanite workshops at University of Utah, Claremont Graduate University, and also in a seminar at Brigham Young University. And I offer to readers my take, influenced by the dialogue that I've been engaged with indigenous scholars of the Restoration traditions and particularly of Haudenosaunee traditions. And again, the book is now, as I speak, in print or printing. It's not in print, it's printing as I speak. It will be released before the Mormon History Association, which will be meeting the first weekend of June. I'll be there in Las Vegas to sign autographs. So if you're there, please come by and say hi. And again, for those who may have joined late, there is a 25% discount on the book for participants in the Book of Mormon Perspective that's available through April 30th if you follow the QR code on the screen. So again, Paul, thank you for the invitation to participate. I hope that what I have had to contribute helps us move more in that direction of peace and to achieve the ideals that the peacemaker has laid out for all of us. Thank you.
And thank you, Thomas. Let me add that he's also scheduled for a presentation at the John Whitmer Historic Association. I believe that's in Council Bluffs or Omaha in September. and
Yes.
I get to be on the panel to cross-examine him. So looking forward to that. Um, and further, he has presented previously on the Popol Vuh, the native text of the Maya, and to be able to provide the microphone for people of other cultures to be able to share has been one of his primary motives. Since the two of us both have been the benefits of cross-cultural marriage, to be able to appreciate that there's so much we have to learn from the people of other cultures. And here is an example of it. I'm just delighted to have Thomas be able to share and then summarize again today. But I'm going to keep moving here because hopefully we can come back for more questions after we've heard the rest of the presentations. I have not seen Whitney nor Rainbow come on. If they have, then please, Deb, you can let me know. So I think James Lucas is next on his presentation on Zion.
All right, so I'm going to run through these slides quickly, since it was a long, turgid presentation before. But basically, this presentation is based on a book that was published originally in the 1990s called Working Towards Zion, Principles of the United Order for the Modern World, by myself, and my co-author is Warner Woodworth. Here he's shown with the Nobel Prize, Peace Prize winner, Muhammad Yunus, his good buddy, who is the founder of the Grameen Bank in Bangladesh. And basically, okay, I apologize. Not only am I messed up here as far as controlling my my PowerPoint, but I also have been fighting off a bad cough. So if I start to hack and cough in the middle of this, make no mind of it. I'll recover. I have been for several days. So basically, the question is, you know, we face difficulties in our modern world, and I'm just going to apologize for flipping through these slides, but we have global suffering, we have mass layoffs, we have a situation where since the 1970s, the pay has separated from productivity. So in other words, the top line is growth in productivity, bottom line is growth in pay. So you see, prior to the 1970s, they sort of tracked together. So if the company was more productive, you know, salaries generally went up, but that relationship has been broken apart since the 1970s. We have Gen Z now. You know, those of us on this call tend to be of a certain age, as we'd say in French, but I'm sure you all have children or grandchildren or other people that you know of the younger generation who are kind of discouraged about their prospects for the future and the job prospects. This is reflected in a sharp decline in the birth rate. And this, so that maybe not in our lifetimes, but very shortly after our lifetimes, the world will see a collapse in population. And these factors, the economic factors, are a key part of it. And this is true amongst Latter-day Saints as well. I didn't have this slide the last time, but even amongst the LDS church, you know, famous for its high birth rates, this has now gone down. LDS birth rates are higher than the average, but they have declined with the rest. And this is shown on the right side of this graph, which shows children of record. That's when new babies are born, they are receive an ordinance called a blessing, and then they're recorded on the church records. And so this figure on the right is a good record of the number of births in the church. And you notice that even though convert baptisms have gone up and total membership has gone up, children records are flat. And this is because even in the Latter-day Saint community, this is being this discouragement is being reflected. So we have the famous quote from Joseph Smith, the call to action: "Man filled with love will go about blessing the entire world." I shared this quote from Joseph F. Smith, Hyrum's son, who made this statement that a religion which has not the power to save people temporarily, make them prosperous and happy, cannot be depended upon to save them spiritually. So that links the two areas. And this has been a principle of the gospel since early times. I noted here that we have, well, we start at the bottom with the account of the city of Enoch, where there were no poor among them. I pointed out the parallels between the book of Acts and the description of the communal church operation that's described in the beginning chapters of the book of Acts. And then I note that in the Book of Mormon, that this very same kind of language, they had all things in common among them, is also used to describe the great peace of fourth Nephi. So I'd be interested to, I'd suggested when Thomas did his first presentation that if you're looking for a naturalistic explanation, that the book of Acts might be a more logical source of the description of the great peace in the Book of Mormon, but we can talk about that later. Okay, so what are the principles of the United Order? This is, again, it's consecration, that we're supposed to devote all that we have to the kingdom, to Zion. And this is, of course, where everybody stops, usually, because at least in the LDS tradition, basically everybody sits around asking themselves, if a bishop came to me and asked me to turn over all my property, would I do that? And that's a struggle. But I pointed out that that's only the first step, that actually it's the principle of consecration and stewardship. In the Doctrine and Covenants 42, which is the same in both our LDS, Community of Christ and LDS Doctrine and Covenants, the idea is that there would be a redistribution and that people would get their properties back, or would get properties back sufficient for their family and for their support. And that this would be on the principle of equality. And I'm not sure if this is, I didn't get the Community of Christ citation for this, but I'm pretty sure that this would be in the Community of Christ Doctrine and Covenants. It's not given that one man should possess that which is above another. Wherefore the world lies in sin. So how do we accomplish that? So what's interesting is that when the saints started to try to apply the law of consecration in the 1830s, in the context of an agrarian economy, they did not forego, I mean, they employed the concept of private property. Everybody was supposed to give their donations to the church in a firm, something that could not be withdrawn. But once the stewardships were passed out to people, they would retain those as a form of private property, and the church could not take them back from people, even if they left the church. We have the principle of work and self-reliance. So this again is a verse found in both Doctrine and Covenants, Community of Christ, and LDS. Thou shalt not be idle, for he is idle shall not eat the bread or wear the garments of the laborer. So we have a principle here of where there's a mutual commitment. And finally, we have the category of the institution of the treasury, where there was supposed to be some kind of a treasury, a storehouse or something, where excess surplus would be paid into it, and then that would be given out by the voice and common consent of the order to people to help them with their stewardships. Again, this is in the context of an economy that was an agrarian economy. This is the 1830s, where the large majority of people were self-employed, essentially. They either had a small farm or they had a small shop or something like that, maybe. But the large majority of people were self-employed. Um, then, of course, the Saints had their problems, and they were less ambitious about implementing the United Order in Nauvoo. And then after Joseph Smith's assassination, of course, the movement kind of broke up, and a large body remained in the Midwest and eventually coalesced around Joseph Smith III. Another large body went to the West under Brigham Young and the Apostles. So now I'm kind of taking one path, and I apologize for that. As I said, I'd be interested to know. I know that Zionic principles are very strong in the community of Christ, and I'd be very interested to get information about what developed there. But I'm following down the Utah track here because this has got some interesting bearing on our current situation. So in the 1860s, 70s, and 80s, under Brigham Young and his successors, a concerted effort was made to implement the United Order. The problem was that there was a different economy. By the 1860s and 1870s, even in the United States, the Industrial Revolution had come. And this was not foreign to the apostles, because they had all been missionaries in England in the early 1840s at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. So they had seen the Industrial Revolution firsthand themselves, knew what it was all about, and excuse me, and confronted the problem of how do you implement these United Order principles, which were given in the context of an 1830s agrarian economy. How do you apply them in an industrializing economy? So as this quote from Brigham Young, based on his experience of as a missionary in England, what he observed, and he says that he observes a poor woman who has only one set of clothes, and who he asks, who is she laboring for those who, many of them, are living in luxury. And he asks, what is to be done? The Latter-day Saints will never accomplish their mission until this inequality shall cease upon the earth. So basically, I don't know, just flip through these and give summaries so as not to take up a ton of time. So as they confronted the idea of implementing the United Order in Utah and the West in the 1860s and 70s and 80s, where the United States had already launched into the Industrial Revolution, they realized there had to be some adaptations. So they realized, first of all, that it was not a situation anymore where everybody was self-employed as a small farmer or small shopkeeper. You had to have bigger operations, which just meant you're going to have to gather people together in some way. So the United Order efforts were very varied in Utah. They were very flexible. The ZCMI, the Zionist Cooperative Mercantile Institution, was an effort to get the merchants of Salt Lake to unite in a united order. And in doing so, they created the world's first department store, which is what ZCMI was. They launched large projects, industrial projects that would require, many people to work in them, like, for example, the Provo woolen mills. And they confronted then the issue of how do these capitalistic-looking enterprises, could reflect the principles of the United Order. And so John Taylor has, people in the, well, I just showed you a picture of the Provo woolen mills. They asked him, weren't we supposed to have some common consent about how we run this thing? And John Taylor's reply was, well, you are the owners, because this was a cooperative. You're the owners. So you elect who runs the thing. You elect management, and in this way, you are exercising your common consent and your rights under the United Order. And in this way, you're no different than Andrew Carnegie. You know, that's the same way he has to operate. He elects the management. He controls. Well, you elect the management, so you control this woolen mill just as much as Andrew Carnegie controls his um, steel mills. So now equality. This was not a strict arithmetic equality. Brigham Young here, in kind of his snide style, he could be kind of blunt. Said, look, if we just divided everything up equally, in a year we'd have to divide it up again because some people would have more and some people would waste their stuff. So we've got to be practical about this, how we organize this, and make sure things are run competently and so forth. And finally, you have the issue of finance. And here's another John Taylor quote. Talk about financiering. Remember, this is the era when Wall Street is born. The modern Wall Street is born. So John Taylor here is saying, well, instead of financiering to make yourself wealthy, why don't we think about financiering for the poor, for the welfare of Zion and building up Zion, and to furnish full employment for all. So that's how they reflected on what they saw. Okay, now those didn't work out very well. I went over some of the reasons they died out. Mainly the United States federal government coming in and disincorporating the LDS Church and forcing the properties to go into private hands as a part of the Americanization of Utah. That's a long story. But subsequently, at least the LDS Church has a long record of engaging in welfare type services. And in
James,
addition to that,
please get to the Spanish.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I'm dragging through here. Okay, so now the question is, how is it? There we go. Got him.
There.
All right. So the question is there a way to use United Order principles that makes sense and works and functions in a modern industrial economy? And the answer is yes, it's been done. This is Mondragon, a town in Spain, northwestern Spain. It's in the Basque Country. And starting in the 1950s, a young parish priest was assigned to Mondragon named Jose Maria Arsmendereta, referred to as Don Jose Maria for short, who was very much imbued with Catholic social gospel teachings, didn't know anything about Mormon United Orders, but he worked with his parishioners and basically helped them start cooperatives, first of all, little plants, and then eventually, long story short, today the Mondragon cooperatives are, here's just a picture of one of their plants. Here's the stats. They have over 70,000 employee owners. They have sales in 150 countries, over 11 billion euros in revenue, almost 2 billion EBITDA, euros of EBITDA. And they have equality in the sense that they have salary caps, but the most when they have, and it's been around for 70 years now. So it's been through recessions and downturns and upturns and so forth. And what they do, instead of just laying off a bunch of people when times get tough, is that they work with a way to kind of either go on half pay or move people to other co-ops so that minimizing layoffs is a big priority. And then most importantly, they have their own bank, a big bank, 1.3 million customers, 400 offices. And this bank not only functions as a bank for the group, but it also is has an arm that is a venture capital arm, which sponsors the startup of new cooperatives. So that's why, you know, when I said there's 70,000 employee owners, there's almost 100 different companies within the complex, and they do tons and tons of different things. So my argument was care for the poor. Okay, so this is so our argument is now, okay, sociologists have, everybody knows about Mondragon, or at least people that are interested in this subject. It's certainly well known in Europe. And they ask, why can't we, people tried to replicate Mondragon, and it's not really worked. And, you know, sociologists scratch their heads as to why you couldn't have another Mondragon. And our contention in our book is that this is because what Mondragon has achieved, which Don Jose Maria achieved, was he basically recreated the principles of the United Order, and a way that, which includes things like moral motivations, a spirit of care for the poor, care for others, and consecration to the cooperative, that is not something that you find in a normal business, and that's why they succeeded. And there's just typical structure of how they're organized, and how they've achieved that. So if I could take 2 more minutes. So anyway, I have a QR code, but it may not work. But if anybody wants to, you can just go to Amazon, and if you Google "Working Towards Zion," you know, they'll get you. Now, I wanted to just briefly here do a case study of how is it that a United Order megaplex or industrial complex would be different than what we have in our modern economy. So I'm doing, this is for just 2 quick minutes, if you can bear with me. My case study is artificial intelligence. Now, I'm an artificial intelligence skeptic. I remind everybody that the people who say artificial intelligence is going to replace 80% of all jobs, those people who say that are also trying to sell artificial intelligence products. So I have a certain amount of cynicism about some of what's been claimed for artificial intelligence. Nonetheless, we've all seen headlines like this, where it's certain that artificial intelligence is going to replace a certain amount of labor, and it's, you know, it's intellectual labor. It's you know, beginning engineers, beginning lawyers, beginning salespeople, and so forth, which is why, as particularly the younger generation, is so scared of this. And so, just to, here's the difference in a nutshell between what I see between a United Order / Mondragon style complex, industrial complex, and everything else. And the question is, who decides? In a modern corporation, it's the CEO who decides. You know, we're going to implement artificial intelligence, and all of a sudden we're going to lay off 20,000 people. Now, why does the CEO make that decision? Well, his perspective is short term. His payment comes through stock options, which are tied to the stock price. If you slash the labor force, you're slashing your costs, and Wall Street likes that. The stock market likes that. That boosts the stock price of the company, which makes the CEO's stock options better, more valuable. The CEO, of course, has very little contact with the regular workforce. His income is hundreds of times that of an average employee. And so he has usually little interface with the employees from his luxurious corner office. So, as I say, he like the stock market, views employees as a cost factor to be minimized. The goal is to pump up the bottom line in the short term to please the stock market, get that stock price up, so that the stock options that the CEO has will become more valuable. And So he answers to the stock market, analysts, and fund managers. Now, here is what happens when you have a cooperative. Who decides? What's the employee owners? Their perspective is long-term because their compensation is really based on the enterprise surviving over the long term and surviving and prospering over the long term. They're in this job. They'd like to keep this job. Maybe they'd like to have this company still be around when their kids come to work, start their careers. So you have a very long-term perspective. And the goal is long-term corporate success, not short-term corporate success. The decisions now would a United Order enterprise not implement artificial intelligence? The answer is yes, they would. If there was a real valuable productivity benefit to come from implementing artificial intelligence, of course, the employee owners would implement it because they have to be competitive. We're at least under our current world, we're still dealing with a competitive free market economy, and the United Order has to compete just as much as anyone else. However, the decision as to whether to implement the artificial intelligence isn't made in the CEO's corner suite, but it would be made by the people who are actually on the front lines, who actually could see, wow, if we implemented this artificial intelligence, we really could increase our productivity by 80%, so let's do it. But the implementation would be made by the people that the CEO would be firing under our modern system. In United Order, the management is viewed as partners, not bosses, and because the management answers to the employees and to the customers, so management will actively seek feedback and input from both. So the decision to implement artificial intelligence, for example, if the manager wants to get reelected to his job at the next annual meeting, he's going to go out to the employees and say, okay, we've got this artificial intelligence stuff. How can we actually make this useful to make our company more productive? What do you think? As opposed to, you just got laid off because I have artificial intelligence. So anyway, that's my presentation. I apologize for going on so long.
No,
You want to cut me out of the...
I'm sorry, James, I didn't invite you to give us the artificial intelligence as a separate presentation. I think it probably merited that. But anyway, thank you, and let's get on to Karen for her summation, please.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. I bet the sound isn't great. I'm on a different microphone, so I apologize. And I'm going to hit share, I guess. I see you. Is that normal, Paul? Am I supposed to do anything to put myself on the screen here?
You don't need to put yourself on. What you hit the share. Then if the share comes up, then we're moving. If it works like it did for James, then we hesitate for a moment.
Yeah. And I don't actually need the... Oh, what the heck? I'll just go straight to... Can you guys
It's
see?
coming.
There you go. You could see that, right?
There you are. The Whitney documents before us.
Great. And you can still hear me, right?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. All right. I'll go through this quickly because this will all be available. I didn't send you the links that I promised. One of them wasn't up until today. So I'll send you the links that I promised this time. And you can, if you'll send them to the group, Paul, that would be great. Okay.
Send them to Robert, please.
Pardon me?
Send them to Robert Cook, and he is the technologist that has everyone's address.
Oh, okay. And I have his?
Yes.
Somewhere. Okay. All right. We'll do. Okay. So my presentation was on what's known as the Whitney documents. This has to do with Joseph Smith and his alleged practice of polygamy. My point is that there's another way to look at these documents other than the way they've always been interpreted, or almost always been interpreted. the documents are claimed as evidence that Sarah Ann Whitney was married to Joseph Smith in July of 1842. The reason we have that date is because we've got an affidavit from Sarah Ann from 1869. So that's 25 years after Joseph's death, saying that she had been married to him in July of 1842. We also have an affidavit from her mother at the same time, 25 years later, well, 25 years after Joseph died. So 29 years later, saying that her daughter was married or sealed to Joseph Smith in July 1842. And my presentation originally explained that we don't have any marriage record for them. We don't have anything written down. We don't have any letters, contemporaneous letters explaining that they were married. There's no indication. There's nothing like that. And just to say quickly that Joseph Smith's sons were in Utah in the 1860s preaching that their father did not practice polygamy. So Joseph F. Smith thought he would just gather up all the evidence that they had of Joseph's polygamy and put the issue to rest. But as he told Orson Pratt later, when he went to do that, he could not find any evidence for Joseph Smith's polygamy. So he went to collecting affidavits from these women, some of them in their old age. And there's just an example of one from his book. And this one is one of the ones that I just showed you. So we'll go back, and the problem with Elizabeth, that's Sarah Ann's mother, the problem with her affidavit is that in 1869, she swears out this affidavit that says that her daughter had been married or sealed to Joseph Smith in July of 1842. But if we go back and look at an October 1842 declaration that she signed at the time, saying that she knew of no system of marriage being practiced in the church except monogamy, which was what the Book of Doctrine and Covenants specified at that time. And we've got the excerpt from the 1835 Doctrine and Covenants, which specifies one man, one wife, and says that polygamy is a crime. So these women, including Elizabeth Ann Whitney, testified that there was no polygamy being practiced in Nauvoo at that time, in the church, I should say, at that time. So one of them is not correct. Either her 1869 affidavit is not true, or her October 1842 statement is not true. I believe her in October of 1842. I think she was telling the truth at that time. So again, we don't have a record for Joseph Smith and Sarah Ann Whitney being married, but we do have a marriage certificate for Sarah Ann being married to Joseph C. Kingsbury the following year in 1843, and the marriage was performed by Joseph Smith. So that's interesting. Joseph C. Kingsbury much later wrote that his marriage to Sarah Ann was merely a pretend marriage to bring about the purposes of God. He doesn't really explain why that would bring about the purposes of God. And later we do find out that he petitioned the church to recompense him to the amount of $8,000, which would be about $200,000 in today's dollars, to reimburse him for taking care of one of Joseph's wives. So that might give us a clue of his motivation. We have, okay, so that's that for the affidavits. We've got a supposed revelation to Newell K. Whitney, giving him instructions on how to marry his daughter, Sarah Ann, to Joseph Smith. And so this is that supposed revelation. And I think it's interesting because in the revelation, the Lord supposedly refers to her as S.A. Whitney, and the instructions for Newell, when he performs the ceremony, instructs him to also call her S.A. Whitney. So it's also got anomalies, and I didn't go into all those, but it's done. The blessing is done in the name of brother and sister Whitney and his holy progenitors. And it goes on to say Jethro, talk about Jethro. So it's just language that I'm not aware of it matching anything that Joseph ever said or taught. We have 2 copies of this in an unknown hand and unknown provenance. Don't know where they came from, but they are dated to the 1870s. So nothing contemporaneous. And then we have another copy that's typewritten from 1912. And that's all we have. We don't have an original of that. Then I went on to, I'm just going to stop sharing at this point because I'm not going to share that again. Oh, see, now I'm not in the middle again. I don't know why. Do you? Anyway, I don't need to be. We'll just look at you, Paul.
We can see you.
Oh, you
Yeah.
can?
Yeah,
Yes.
it's depend on how you have your gallery set up. So
Oh, okay.
you're good to go.
Fabulous. Okay, I'll not make any funny faces then. So the last document that I treated is known as the Whitney letter. And that is a document in Joseph's own hand. It really is his writing. And he wrote it and addressed it to brother and sister Whitney and etc. And that was sometimes a way to say, and the whole household. I don't think that's what he meant in this, because in the letter he refers to you 3 a couple of times. So I think he had somebody in mind as that, etc. Now, the historians universally believe that that was meant to be Sarah Ann, even though she's never named in it. I think there's a case to be made that it could be their adult son, Horace, because Joseph was asking the Whitneys to come, and part of the reason was to pronounce blessings upon our heads, quote unquote. So I would imagine that it might be reasonable for Horace to come along and participate in a blessing for his dad, or his dad and his mom. I don't know. But there's really no reason to think that it's Sarah Ann other than those affidavits that are pretty dubious. So in the letter, he asks them to come and visit him in his lonely retreat. Now, this letter has background to it. And the background is that, in a nutshell, is that Joseph was in hiding for his life. There was an illegal warrant out for his arrest. He was at risk of being extradited back to Missouri, where he would almost certainly be killed if he were tried there. And this letter disclosed his location. It told where he was hiding. So he was in hiding. Emma had to employ complicated subterfuge to go and visit him, which she did, bless her heart. She loved him so much. And she went through great pains to sort of quietly and discreetly get out of the house to go visit him, because the sheriff was keeping a very close watch on her and vigilantly watching the house and watching her movements in the hopes of following her to Joseph's hideout. Joseph had recently met with his friends, again secretly in the middle of the night, on an island. And those friends included, well, it included Emma, it included Hyrum, and it included several friends, the most prominent of which that he talks about later was Newell K. Whitney. And he really gushes about it a few days after that meeting. We have a record, the record of his comments about that meeting. And he expresses his deep love and appreciation for Emma, and his deep appreciation for Hyrum's loyalty, and then his deep appreciation for the sacred ties that he holds with Newell K. Whitney, and told him, Brother Whitney, you know not how strong those ties are, and just really loves those 3 in particular, and expresses that a few days after their meeting. So when you read the letter with that background, it's a reasonable letter to write. Please visit me. I have blessings for us. And he mentions, please burn this letter after you read it. And he says, my life depends on it. Now, obviously, from what we just heard, his life does depend on it, because it has his location right in the letter. So obviously that makes a lot of sense. Unfortunately, a lot of times this is presented by the historians to say that he wanted it burned so Emma would not find it. And to say his life depends on it, I guess, implies that he was afraid she would kill him. I really don't understand that. And supposedly, according to the historians, Emma was always already aware of some marriages that he had to plural wives, which again, I don't believe that, but that's the story. So it wouldn't make any sense for her to kill him over Sarah Ann, as far as I can see. When he says, sorry, lost my place. When he tells them to please try to come, find out when Emma is coming, and don't come when she comes. And again, that's usually presented as so that she won't catch me here with Sarah Ann. Like, don't, avoid Emma because I don't want her to find out. But that it makes a lot more sense to think that the sheriff is watching Emma. So if Emma comes and the sheriff is watching her, and then the friends come too, the sheriff's going to catch them at the same time. I don't think Joseph wanted that for his friends. I don't know if they could have been, implicated in aiding and abetting a fugitive at that point. I don't know, but I do know that Joseph was very careful and very considerate of his friends. So that makes a lot more sense to me. Either way, the blessing or the letter cannot be considered as definitive proof that Joseph was married to Sarah Ann Whitney. So I will give the link to you guys that you can see the whole presentation. So there's my visual aid. So I have a book and a video called Woe Unto You Scribes, The Hidden History of Polygamy, that tells this story. The video's better. It shows the documents better than the book. The book was originally intended just for the apostles so that they can understand that they were not getting the whole history story from the church historians and others. So I abbreviated the book quite a bit. It still gets the point across, and people still request the book all the time. I sell it at cost on the Lulu bookstore, and that's all available at the website, which I'll give you a link to. I think that is all I had. I was trying to stick to 5 minutes, and I see I had a little extra leeway, but I'm good with that. So you guys can see the longer presentation. Also, I will provide a link that starts right at the Whitney section in the movie, because the movie's over 2 hours. It's a full-length documentary, but the Whitney section, I'll make sure one of the links goes straight to that section when you click on it.
Thank you, Karen, and thank you for the awesome research that you presented. Steve, we still have opportunity for yours, and so please share your imagery, your message, stewardship in the Book of Mormon. You need to unmute. I don't hear your voice yet.
Can you see that, Paul?
Yes, now I see it.
I'm just going to go ahead with this. I'm going to go through a few slides that I kind of put together, and I hope you can hear me okay. I'm not hearing.
Okay.
You're coming through clear.
Okay. Thank you very much. Sorry about that. In looking at the subject after giving my testimony about my introduction to the Book of Mormon, I wanted to establish everybody on the same page with some ideas and concepts of stewardship, if we're going to talk about stewardship, and how comprehensive it is in all parts of our life. It's not just very narrow, like with just money or just property. I gave some, a little bit of church background here about, about stewardship and people's interpretation in the past. And in order to let the Book of Mormon speak for itself, I needed to find those scriptures that would help me, define its message as it was trying to do it, not try to reinterpret it. And so I used more than a dozen different stewardship words and looked around in the scriptures. I organized those according to the mode that I found them. I gave examples of some of these scriptures, like rich or inequality or money or etc. And the different colors here, of course, as I did it last time, represent the 4 different modes that I've found: warnings, direct instructions, wise counsel, and blessings and promises, of which I found many different verses, and of course gave you a link before. My conclusion after looking at all these was that we get a little more organized step-by-step approach in the Bible, but the Book of Mormon itself is not a cookbook approach, and yet it's giving some great stories, examples, and history that help underscore its ideas about stewardship. And I gave just my little touch here on stewardship becomes a covenant journey. One of the little insights I gave before was about travel and how both the Jaredites and Nephites, when they did have to travel, they zeroed in on that which was a priority important for them, trusting in the Lord. And that allows us to then be able to come to some conclusions in our own day about what are our priorities as we think about stewardship. I had organized the different scriptures, took the messages and understandings about and comments that it had by these 4 categories. And then I finally came to a list. I got a good suggestion from James last time about giving some examples from the Book of Mormon. For instance, King Benjamin had unpaid leadership. We find that in Mosiah chapter 1. And using wise and intelligent means to witness about souls. We had Jacob's preaching about sin and being very straightforward. We talked about not coveting, but holding on to assets. But in the land of Jershon, the anti-Nephi Lehi's people were given a whole country as an inheritance to start over upon their conversion from the son of Alma and the sons of Mosiah, etc. So there was a number of these different teachings. I found about 11 of them. There could possibly be more in all of the different aspects of what was important in the Book of Mormon and what it had to say about the different aspects of stewardship, especially as it related to people. And if we were to look, for instance, one unique area that I found in Hyrum chapter 2, verse 31, in the RLDS version, it did nicely put together the different steps that help bring about sanctification and righteousness. I didn't find much help in the Book of Mormon versus Bible contributions where it stood out by itself, but I did come to the conclusion that since the Book of Mormon itself proposes that it's a supplementary witness, and it is also a companion scripture, that I thought its best contribution was a very clear witness on specific stewardship doctrinal issues, but that it also would be best paired with our other 2 scriptures, the inspired version in the Bible and the Doctrine and Covenants. And having done that, I mentioned that back several decades, I had put together and using all stewardship scriptures from all 3 books, of which the Book of Mormon was very prominent, in a publication that was a self-study class that had case studies, had direct instruction, uh, details, scripture references, fill in the blanks, those kind of things to help people learn the basics of good stewardship. And so, Paul, I just wanted to run through that real quick, and that's where I am, and I'm going to turn it back to you.
Thank you, Steve. I see that with what you're doing, it's still in process, and so I would ask for you to consider coming back for another edition, because it appears to me there's a lot more to be added to what you've already given us. And
it's a huge subject, sir. Yes.
it's a big subject, and there's a lot of value in it. And I've heard nothing but very favorable comments in the people that have responded. I recognize the lateness of the hour. I will give just a brief review of the Book of Mormon messages about that is the message that I gave about Moses in the Book of Mormon. And if I can get the slideshow to start, hopefully I've got Moses in the Book of Mormon in front of you. I would just a few slides I will reflect upon the fact that his name is mentioned 75 times in the Book of Mormon, but 43 of those instances are referring to the law of Moses. And all of those highlight the general law of Moses without going into the specifics. And so, in other words, we're supposed to understand that the specifics that are on the wide assortment of plates are where you have to go get that. But the Book of Mormon highlights traditions that we have. So I'm just going to flip through those rather quickly. I found it fascinating that his face showed no luster, and when you look at the Ten Commandments with the portrayal of Moses there coming down off the mountain with his face shining. I came down off the mountain in January, and I'm not sure that my face shines with luster anymore than it did before, but I certainly appreciated the power of the Spirit that I felt there. And the fact that Moses is a hero of tradition, prophesying of the coming of the Messiah, that he's a type raised up. And we see that type represented in the Book of Mormon. And so we see that here's Alma is compared to Moses. We see there's parts of the Moses. Okay, I then went to Moses in the Bible where we pick up more of the story, and I'm not going to review that part. But the fact is, the Bible's account would have been presumably some 600 years prior to the Book of Mormon account. And so the question of how much correspondence do we have? Clearly, there's a good deal of correspondence. At the same time, there are some differences. And the biblical account gives us some details that we certainly don't pick up in the Book of Mormon. There's also a few little discrepancies. For example, was it the angel in the flame of fire in the bush, or was it God speaking? Interesting that, the question of whether Moses was baptized in the cloud and in the sea. Then I also spent a section on Moses as portrayed in history, and those portrayals are interesting because they show his story has been shared by the Greeks, the Romans, Egyptians, and so forth. And it's fascinating to see the variants that the historians have provided. Particularly interesting to see it in Islam, where we pick up Moses pleading to Allah that his brother be separated from the rebellious Israelites, and then they made to wander for 40 years. And then we end up with a meeting between Moses and Muhammad. So there's some rather interesting, I think we could call them perhaps self-serving elements there. And then I pull a section of Moses in the U.S. history. So we have lots of historical references, people like Harriet Tubman and Payne. We had the Martin Luther King, and all the people who have led people out of bondage then are given something of that Moses' position. And so I then presented the 22 points that Lord Raglan presented back in 1936 of what you expect to find on the hero of tradition, and Moses and Jesus and in many respects John Kennedy, our typical heroes often will score high on that list of 22 items. And then I wanted to highlight that that we have these crucial elements that perhaps ought to be emphasized that haven't been. And one was the character of the divine being, with heaven being the crown and earth his footstool. And then the idea that we, like Moses and God, can meet face to face. That having been to Mount Sinai, where God said to Moses, "Take off your shoes, for the ground you're standing upon is holy ground." It was a profound experience to be there and to listen to and feel the whispers that came to me from that. And so in the summation, here's a 600-year gap between Moses and Lehi, and the emphasis on the modern world to be able to hear the whispers from Sinai that give us the Jewish vantage point, saying it was Yahweh, the breath of God, or the Muslim position, Allah provided the breath of God speaking to man, and I am of the Christian tradition saying all of existence has the elements of the divine within it. And so for us to have received the breath of God to give us life and potentially eternal life is to learn to love with every breath and to become people of peace, thereby extending the divine invitation. And while we see that Moses broke the plates that God had written on, there's a lesson there. When we mess up on the gifts of the divine, we need to learn to repent, learn and ask for grace, and learn to practice love in every breath. All right, we've gotten through. It's 9:30, and we'll pause for. Oh, I do want to highlight that I want to thank Blair Bryant in particular for his historical interpretation, suggesting that Moses's mother, the Jewish lady, may well have been adopted into the Pharaoh's court, and therefore influenced, and may have been the maiden that took care of Moses, perhaps under Hatshepsut, who became the woman Pharaoh, and then who was the predecessor to Akhenaten, who taught the monogamous shift for the Egyptians. For the Egyptians to move from a polyandrous, from a polytheist belief to a monotheistic belief, and it corresponds in time with when Moses' mother would have been potentially influencing the court, strikes me as being a fascinating picture of the potential power of one woman to have an impact on history. Furthermore, he also highlighted that the death of the firstborn, putting 100 of Ramses II's children in the tomb in the Valley of the Kings, is a fascinating historical correlation. And so, again, thank you, Blair Bryant, for the insight that helped to expand my presentation and understanding. All right, James has a hand up, and let's yield to that. Well, and by the way, James, I think you promised me the contact information with Mr. Bradley on 116 pages. I'm still looking for that.
Yes, I've reached out to him and will continue to reach out to him.
Okay, thank
He
you.
told me it takes 3 or 4 times for him to respond. So I'll just continue with that.
Thank you. He has not responded to me yet, so I appreciate for your persistence.
Okay. So I just had one quick comment for Thomas. I had, and this is just a point of information. I'm not presenting this as a point of argumentation or anything, just a point of information. A few weeks ago, I attended a Heartlander conference.
Mm-hmm.
And at the Heartlander conference, there was a presentation on the Iroquois. And this speaker contended that the Iroquois, although they were all Lamanites, that the Iroquois were the most Nephitish of the Lamanites, and that they carried forward the most traditions, heritage, memory of the experience of the Nephites. And his example of this was that when the great peacemaker established the great truce treaty, the union of the Iroquois Confederacy, he argued that the reason that the great peacemaker was able to do that with the Iroquois, whereas apparently no other Indian nation really did the equivalent or anything as expansive and cohesive as the Iroquois Confederacy, was because of an ancestral memory of the peace of the time of Fort Nephi. And although the specifics had been lost, that had been carried down in tribal lore and in heritage, and that the great peacemaker was able to draw upon that to bring together the Iroquois Confederacy. And that was an example of how the Iroquois were the most Nephitish of the surviving Lamanites. And as I say, I'm not asking you for your rebuttal or anything, but I just thought, having heard your presentation and then going and hearing this other alternative view of the Iroquois, I thought I'd share that with you because I think it's very interesting. You can look at it from
very
different
much
angles.
so. Yeah, very much so. Thank you. Was that by chance Diane Worth? Because I've heard her she does it in her books, make similar arguments.
This was Ryan Nelson.
Ryan Nelson. Okay.
Who is the main manager of the Heartlander conferences and movement and so forth.
Yeah.
But
so
he hasn't published anything. I asked him. He said he hadn't published anything. I mentioned your forthcoming book, and he was acquainted with you and your work. So, for what it's worth.
Yeah, well, that's definitely interesting, and yeah, like very similar to the arguments that Diane Worth has made in her books. I'm not sure if she's still presenting. She's getting up there in age, so
yeah, I'm not familiar with. I'm familiar with the name, but I'm not that familiar with her work, and I don't know if Ryan drew upon her work to make his presentation or not. I didn't know to ask because I wasn't familiar with Diane being involved with that. But nonetheless, I thought that was an interesting angle.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. And maybe in my next book, I'll address that. I had a whole section on Diane Worth's work that I had to cut because my book was too long. So that'll be part of my next book, I think. So I'll definitely look his stuff up as well.
Okay.
But
that's all. I just wanted to share that with you.
Thomas, if you would please, what do you think of this idea of a prolonged ancestral memory?
What do I think of that idea?
Yeah.
I think it rests on taking the Book of Mormon account as historical, and I don't share that presumption, so it doesn't work so well for me. But if that's the perspective you're coming from, it's an interesting way to incorporate it. I think that it's important, though, that we also acknowledge the way that the Haudenosaunee tell the story, and acknowledge that they certainly have as much right to telling their stories as anyone else. I mean, more so than anyone else. And so I try to put our restoration stories into dialogue with them, and I at least see an effort here in that, based on some presumptions that again I don't share, but that I find interesting nonetheless.
Well, and I thank you for the approach you're taking, and I happen to agree with you. Although, from my own experience being married cross-culturally, I have to ponder that matter of the inherited sense that it passed down for generations. Perhaps there's some evidence for it, and yet it seems like that would be likely to be quite muted.
over a long period of time like that. Yeah. Yeah, I would see it, like more of a cultural memory,
Mhm. It would show up in the mythology as
Yeah.
as a theme, probably in several stories. All right, thank you. Now, Deb, next.
Boyd, go ahead.
Oh, Dr. Thomas, I have a question. I'm sure you're familiar with Chief Midiga,
Hmm.
and I understand he's got a bunch of records, Native American records, and I was wondering if you've had a chance to see him and if you had any observations with him that or thoughts with him from what you've been able to observe. I haven't read them yet, but I was just wondering if you have.
I have skimmed over some images from his app, the app that they put together, the Sacred Records app.
Mhm.
And I've looked into a few of the records that are there. Particularly the one that caught my attention was the what he labels the Popol Vuh, or the Popol Vuh is the another name that's used for it. It's also called the Popol Vuh, and that's a Mayan text that I presented on here a couple of years ago. And I've done a lot of work on that back in the 90s in Guatemala, working with Latter-day Saints in Guatemala and their interpretations of the Popol Vuh in relationship to the Book of Mormon. And so he includes that, and he said in some videos that was shared with him by some of his partners in Mayan communities. And I certainly think that there is much to ponder in terms of a lot of the similarities between the Popol Vuh and the Book of Mormon. The Popol Vuh is a 16th century document. At least the version that we have is a 16th century document that was recorded as a response to a Catholic priest's previous publications in Quiche Maya, in the Quiche Maya language, that introduced the biblical stories. And so scholars today see the Popol Vuh as a response to those biblical stories that defends the original, the prior word, uh, defends it in dialogue with the Bible, not to reject the Bible, but to see it as a complement to the Bible. And the text, it had that important role in the 16th century. Well, the way that it would come into restoration dialogue would not be until the 19th century, because that text would not be published until after the Book of Mormon. And so it comes into the attention of the restoration community when it was published by Bancroft in the late 19th century. And it was actually community or RLDS scholars that first were writing about the Popol Vuh, as they called it, the Popol Vuh. And then it later got the attention of the LDS scholars. And so my article that I presented about here was kind of tracing that history of RLDS and LDS interpretations of the Popol Vuh, and then how that interacts with critical indigenous scholarship today, where it's not uncommon to treat indigenous sacred narratives as other scriptures, as other scriptures in complement to the Bible and to the Book of Mormon. So when I see the work that David Taylor, who calls himself Chief Midiga, is doing, I see something that I've been observing in restoration communities at least since the 1990s, and that is in this tendency to amplify or use the Book of Mormon to legitimize and amplify their own sacred narratives. And it's interesting to watch what's happening. He's stirred up a fair amount of controversy in some of the ways he's approached this work. There are some questions about his authenticity and his tribal ties. He's not a member of an enrolled tribe, for example. I don't like to denigrate people's messages by those sorts of arguments, but I also think it's important that we listen to Ojibwe voices more broadly, not only his voice, and some of those voices have been quite critical of his work. So that's a very quick answer. I will say that there is an interview of me on Mormon Book Reviews where I discuss Chief Mittagah's work in relationship specifically to that White as a Knight article. And I actually will be interviewing tomorrow with Steve Pinecker and Darren Perry. Darren Perry is a Northwestern Shoshone elder, LDS, and we will be talking about David Taylor and Chief Mittagah. And I also appeared in a series of videos with Christopher Blythe at the Brigham Young University, who's done a series of videos quite critical of David Taylor's claims. I'm perhaps less critical than Christopher Blythe, because I think a lot of the criticisms that Christopher Blythe makes against David Taylor could just as legitimately be made against Joseph Smith. So I think we got to be careful in how we approach that. So that's a very quick answer.
Okay, well, I appreciate it. You familiar with Cloud Piler, Philip Landis?
With who is that again?
Philip Landis, Cloud Piler.
No, I'm not.
Have you ever read the Mentina Archives, Nemenhah record?
No, people keep sending those to me. So, but I have not.
Okay.
But I believe they're in that app too, as well.
Okay. I was wondering if they were. Yeah. I don't.
I've
I'll
heard
kind of
they are.
reserve.
I haven't verified that. I've heard they are.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll kind of reserve comment. I've read them, but years ago. I'm not too keen on them anymore.
Yeah.
But anyway, I just was wondering. All right. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
I was going to ask you, Boyd, to clarify about the chief, but I think Thomas has done that well enough. So I won't ask you to clarify any further. We are approaching 10 o'clock, and I'm about to call the fat lady to sing. Oop, I'm going to be the one singing, so therefore let's not say it that way. I am about to conclude this unless there's somebody else with another urgent question or comment. For the beauty of the earth, for the glory of the skies, for the love which from our birth over and around us lies, Lord of all, to thee we raise this our hymn of grateful praise. For the joy of human love, brother, sister, parent, child, friends on earth and friends above, for all gentle thoughts and mild, Lord of all, to thee we raise this our hymn of grateful praise. May we all be blessed as brothers and sisters, breathing the breath of the divine, becoming agents of the Prince of Peace. Thank you for sharing with us this evening. Thank all of you who have come to give us the review of your materials. And again, I so much appreciate the people who week after week keep joining in to share and enjoy the discussions. Some to sit quietly, some to jump in with a question or comment frequently, and some now and then, or some not at all. But what an interesting forum this proves to be for me, and I thank you all so very much for being my friends. Good night.